The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under Jen Torres's front door while she was making breakfast, and it had the kind of opening line that makes your coffee go cold in your hand. Per HOA Covenant Section 12.4, B. All outdoor recreational activities involving minors must cease by 7 a.m. to maintain community tranquility standards. Jen read it 3 times, standing in her doorway in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, watching her 7-year-old Sophia and 5-year-old Emma giggle their way through downward dog poses on the front lawn at 6:45 in the morning, the kind of innocent chaos that shouldn't require a legal defense. What makes situations like this particularly striking is how a complaint about children playing outside before most people have finished their first cup of coffee reveals less about noise levels and more about someone's need to control their surroundings. Quick note before we begin: this is a fictional, dramatized story for education and entertainment. Any resemblance to real people is coincidental. This story is inspired by common HOA situations people talk about online. All names and details here are fictional. Jen had moved into Meadowbrook Estates 6 months earlier, a planned community in suburban Phoenix, where every house looked like it had been extruded from the same beige mold, and she started the morning yoga sessions 3 weeks ago after her youngest asked why they couldn't do the stretchy stuff outside where the birds could see them. It was Marcus, her husband, who built the simple platform on their front lawn, just a smooth wooden deck that didn't require HOA approval because it was temporary and removable, and the girls had decorated it with chalk drawings of suns and flowers that washed away with the evening sprinkler system. The sessions lasted 20 minutes, started at 6:30 a.m. when the Arizona air was still cool enough to breathe, and involved more giggling than actual yoga, but it had become their thing, the 3 of them moving through poses while Marcus watched from the porch with his coffee, occasionally calling out modifications like, "Sophia, trees don't usually bend that way," or "Emma, that's interpretive dance, not warrior pose." The letter was signed by Patricia Hendricks, HOA board president, and it referenced a covenant section that Jen had to dig through 47 pages of dense legal text to find, buried in a subsection about visual and auditory disturbances during designated quiet hours, which apparently ran from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. on weekdays. The covenant language was deliberately vague, referring to activities that may reasonably be expected to disturb the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties, with no objective definition of what constituted disturbance or who got to decide what was reasonable. What Jen didn't know yet was that Patricia Hendricks lived 3 houses down, had filed noise complaints about 11 different neighbors in the past 2 years, and had a particular obsession with what she called the degradation of property aesthetics through unregulated outdoor activities, which apparently included children existing visibly before business hours. Jen's first instinct was to comply, to move the yoga sessions to the backyard or inside, to avoid confrontation the way she'd been avoiding it her whole life, telling herself it wasn't worth the fight, even as a small part of her recognized that backing down would teach her daughters that angry letters from strangers carry more weight than their own right to play in their own yard. She spent that evening researching HOA law in Arizona, learning that while associations have broad authority to enforce reasonable rules, courts generally side with homeowners when restrictions significantly interfere with normal family activities or when enforcement is arbitrary and selective. She discovered that the quiet hours provision in her CC and RS was actually more restrictive than state noise ordinances, which only prohibited disturbances that were unreasonable and excessive, and gave examples like power tools, loud music, and construction equipment, not children's laughter during morning exercise. Marcus suggested she request a formal hearing, pointing out that they had documentation showing the yoga sessions involved no amplified sound, no equipment beyond yoga mats, and happened during hours when multiple neighbors were already outside walking dogs, getting newspapers, and starting lawn maintenance. But Jen hesitated, spent 3 days drafting and redrafting a response email that got progressively more apologetic with each version, until her daughter Sophia asked her why they couldn't do yoga outside anymore, and Jen realized she didn't have an answer that didn't sound like, because someone scary sent us a letter. The next morning, at exactly 6:30 a.m., Jen and her daughters rolled out their mats on the front lawn and began their session. It wasn't defiance exactly, more like a quiet refusal to accept that someone else's preference for silence outweighed her children's right to play, and she convinced herself that maybe Patricia hadn't actually meant it, that maybe the letter was just a formality, that maybe no one would actually care. Patricia cared. By 6:45 a.m., she was standing at the edge of Jen's property line, arms crossed, wearing expensive athleisure that had never seen actual athletics, filming the yoga session on her phone while Sophia tried to hold a tree pose and kept glancing nervously at the angry woman with the camera. Patricia didn't say anything, just stood there documenting what she would later describe in her complaint as willful violation of community standards and deliberate defiance of board directives. And when Jen tried to approach her to talk, Patricia held up one hand like a traffic cop and said, "Save it for the hearing, Mrs. Torres. You'll have your chance to explain why you think rules don't apply to you." The formal hearing notice arrived 2 days later, scheduling a meeting for the following Thursday at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse, with language about potential fines starting at $100 per violation and escalating to $500 per day for continued noncompliance. Jen finally stopped avoiding the fight. She spent the next week gathering evidence. Timestamps from her doorbell camera showing that Patricia's own landscaping crew started work at 6 a.m. every Wednesday, creating noise levels significantly higher than children's voices. Documentation from 3 other neighbors confirming they'd never heard or been disturbed by the yoga sessions. A noise meter app recording showing that the sessions registered below 50 decibels, quieter than normal conversation, and well below Phoenix's daytime noise limit of 65 decibels, and copies of emails from 8 families in the community asking if they could join the morning yoga sessions because their kids had seen Sophia and Emma and wanted to participate. She also discovered something interesting in the HOA bylaws. The board president wasn't actually authorized to issue violation notices without a formal vote from the full 5-member board, and Patricia had been acting unilaterally, sending letters on official HOA letterhead without consulting the other board members or following proper procedure. This mattered because Arizona's Planned Community Act requires HOAs to follow their own procedural rules, and violation notices issued without proper authority are legally unenforceable, meaning Jen could challenge the entire process as invalid before even addressing the substance of the complaint. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. If you're finding value in this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you've ever experienced a similar HOA or neighborhood situation, feel free to share your story in the comments. The hearing room was set up like a miniature courtroom, with the 5 board members sitting behind a long table facing rows of folding chairs where about 30 homeowners had gathered, many of them parents who'd heard about the yoga controversy and wanted to see how the board would handle what one father called the criminalization of childhood. Patricia opened with a 15-minute presentation featuring photos of the yoga sessions, printouts of the covenant language, and a passionate speech about how allowing unchecked outdoor activities during quiet hours would lead to complete breakdown of community standards. She showed the video she'd taken, zooming in on Sophia's face to demonstrate what she called visual evidence of deliberate disruption, which mostly showed a 7-year-old trying to balance on one foot while glancing worriedly at the woman filming her. Jen's presentation took 3 minutes. She showed the noise measurements, the timestamps proving selective enforcement, the emails from interested families, and the section of the bylaws proving Patricia had issued the violation notice without board authorization. Then she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She invited the board members to attend a morning session themselves to experience firsthand what they were being asked to prohibit, to watch 2 little girls doing stretches on their own lawn, and decide whether that actually constituted a disturbance worth fining their mother $500 per day. Board member Robert Chun, the quiet neighbor who'd always waved at the yoga sessions from his morning walks, asked Patricia a simple question. Have you personally been disturbed by these sessions, or are you enforcing this based on potential disturbance? Patricia's response was telling. The covenant doesn't require actual disturbance, Robert. It prohibits activities that may reasonably be expected to disturb. I'm protecting property values by maintaining standards before they erode. Chin looked at the other board members, then at Jen, then back at Patricia. So you're fining a family for something that hasn't actually disturbed anyone based on your prediction that it might, even though multiple neighbors have said it doesn't bother them? Even the board member who usually voted with Patricia looked uncomfortable. The vote was 4-1 against enforcement, with Patricia casting the single dissenting vote. But Chen went further, proposing an amendment to the quiet hours provision clarifying that it applied to mechanical noise, amplified sound, and activities involving power equipment, but specifically exempted Normal recreational activities involving minors, including but not limited to outdoor play, sports practice, and exercise, provided such activities do not involve amplified sound or mechanical equipment. The amendment passed 4-1, and Chen added a procedural requirement that all future violation notices be approved by at least 3 board members before being issued, effectively ending Patricia's practice of unilateral enforcement. What happened next surprised Jen more than anything else. The following Saturday morning, when she and the girls rolled out their mats at 6:30 a.m., they found Robert Chen and his 2 teenagers setting up mats next to theirs, followed by the family from across the street, then the single mom from 2 doors down with her son, until there were 15 people of various ages and flexibility levels attempting downward dog on the Torres front lawn while Marcus handed out spare mats and tried not to laugh at the chaos. Patricia watched from her window, and while she never apologized or acknowledged the situation, her landscaping crew's Wednesday morning start time mysteriously shifted to 8 a.m. the following week. Jen learned something during those weeks of avoiding confrontation and then finally engaging with it. Sometimes the people who seem most powerful are only powerful because no one questions their authority, and sometimes the act of calmly standing your ground while inviting scrutiny is more effective than any aggressive defense. The morning yoga sessions continued, expanded into weekend sessions by popular demand, and eventually evolved into an informal community fitness group that met 3 times a week. Sophia still asks occasionally why the angry lady filmed them that morning, and Jen tells her the truth. Some people need to control their environment so badly that they see other people's joy as a threat. But that doesn't mean you stop being joyful, it just means you keep doing your tree pose and let them work through their own issues. Here's what's striking about situations where someone demands you stop doing something harmless. Enforcement says more about the enforcer than the act. Every like you leave on this video helps us show up and search results for families facing similar situations. Every subscription keeps you informed before it's your turn. This community we're building here, it matters. Thank you for being part of it.